Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And on our panel tonight, Ken Clarke, who first served in Margaret Thatcher's government, was Chancellor of the Exchequer under John Major, is retiring at the next election after nearly 50 years as an MP. Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, promoted by Jeremy Corbyn this summer after just 1 year as an MP, Angela Rayner. From UKIP, not an MP nor an MEP, but the runner-up in their leadership contest, Lisa Duffy. The economist and former finance minister of Greece, now trying to found a new pan-European political movement, Yanis Varoufakis, and the historian and previous proprietor of the Daily Telegraph, who did serve 2 years in prison in the US for fraud while protesting his innocence and railing against the American legal system as fraudulent, fascistic, and corrupt. Conrad Black. Thank you very much. And as always, you can join the debate, of course, on Facebook, Twitter, or by texting us on 83981. The first question from Carol Hewson, please. Carol Hewson.
Clinton or Trump?
Clinton or Trump? Conrad Black.
Trump. I assume you want a word of explanation. May I? On their merits, they're actually both very nice people. The caricature of the ugly American that you sometimes imagine Trump to be is not the real Donald Trump. He's a very amusing raconteur and a very generous man. And she is a most gracious woman. And I may say, conversationally, she's a good deal more coarse than he is. But the reason that I think it should be Trump is that the last 20 years have been the 20 worst years of presidential misgovernment in the history of the United States by both parties. You know the Great Recession, you know the housing bubble, you know that they've doubled the deficit, 233 years of accumulated deficit, doubled in 7 years, to produce a 1% economic growth rate. After 15 million people have fallen out of the workforce, this shambles in the Middle East, abandoning virtually all the ground forces, military capability for a whole decade there, and now we have the Russians and Iranians as our allies in what's left of Iraq, and they're our opponents at least half the time in what's left of Syria, and this horrible humanitarian crisis largely generated by well-intentioned but incompetent American-led intervention.
And why Trump?
One, he is not complicit in any of it. They tried changing, they took the Congress away from Clinton and brought in Gingrich and Bob Dole. They took it back and gave it to Pelosi, took it away again, brought in John Boehner. Both parties, legislative branch and executive branch, have been incompetent for 20 years. And Donald is not complicit in any of it. And there is one other aspect. These aren't dynasties, the Bushes and Clintons. Now, they've rendered some service, and they're people that, to the extent I know them, which I do know some of them, they're nice people, but that's not the issue. 32 years in a row, from 1981 to 2013, one member or other of one of those families was in one of the three top offices in the U.S. government, president, vice president, and secretary of state, 32 years in a row. They are just passing the great offices of state back and forth and amongst themselves. It's a stitch up, and Donald's right. It's time for a change.
Okay. Angela Rayner.
Well, nobody will be surprised to hear me say absolutely Hillary if I'm given the choice between Hillary and Donald Trump, and not just because of her gender. I think, you know, we've always had a close relationship with the United States, and it absolutely petrifies me that we will become a laughingstock across the world if someone like Donald Trump is at the helm of the United States. I think he's a misogynist. I think he says some horrible things about people, and instead of uniting the United States and having a real focus on how we're going to bring about a global globalised world that's free from tyranny and abuse, he seems to want to provoke more of it. So I would want to see Hillary rather than Donald Trump.
The woman in green there. Woman in the green jacket.
The size of United States of America, is this the best you can come up with, these two candidates?
Absolutely. Ken Clarke.
Well, I agree with that point. I obviously would vote for Clinton if I was an American. I actually agree with some of Conrad's comments, not all of them, on the problems of American politics, which is not satisfactory. I agree quite a bit with his criticism, for example, of policy in the Middle East for the last 20 years, which has not actually been a triumph. But the idea that Donald Trump is the answer, I probably don't need to argue too fervently to a British television audience or an audience in Hartlepool. You say...
Why
is
that?
Well, he is... The whole thing is he's a ridiculous parody in public. He may be a delightful, charming man in private. I wouldn't know. As Conrad says, I'm surprised. He comes over as the most outrageous kind of loudmouth buffoon. And he seems... if his gaffes were deliberate, it would be better, but he isn't doing it to provoke. He keeps saying unbelievably silly and quite offensive things. The tragedy is that this is an election for the chief executive of the most powerful nation in the world. There are a huge list of problems to be tackled, some of which just Conrad just mentioned. Others, of course, we can think of. It has a great bearing on us. And the debate that's going on, the public debate, it's farcical. This is the way you're deciding this crucial post for the next 4 years.
You on the gangway there, you sir. There.
Yeah, you know, as far as Clinton is concerned, the reason why she isn't running away with it is because she is part of the establishment. And you know, we can agree or disagree about Donald Trump all we want, but at the end of the day, he is that outsider, and that's the only reason why he's actually got this far in the first place.
So are you for Trump or Clinton?
Neither. If I had a thought, it would be Gary Johnson.
Okay. And the woman at the back there, at the very back, and then I'll come to you, Jens.
This is actually a hot topic for me because we have dual nationality and I actually vote in the US presidential election. And Hillary Clinton compared to Donald Trump is a Boy Scout compared to Hillary. You couldn't trust Hillary if her tongue came notarized. She has a litany of anyone else, Conrad is absolutely right, anyone else would be in jail for what she's done. And it's only because of this administration that she's not. And Donald Trump is definitely the best person to go with. Okay. Given the choice.
Yanis Varoufakis.
Well, I was asked this question, Carol. A few months ago, I was in New York, and I was on stage with Noam Chomsky, and we were both asked, what would we do if we were Americans and had a vote in the United States? And both of us, in one voice, said, if we were in a safe state, we would vote for somebody else. A third candidate. If you are left-leaning, you vote for the Green Party. If you're right-leaning, you vote for the Libertarian Party. But if you are in a swing state, you hold your nose tightly and you vote for Hillary. And the reason why you need to hold your nose is that because with whisper by whisper, email by email, memo by memo, we are finding out the truth about the Hillary Clinton who is servile to Wall Street, who is geopolitically irresponsible, and who has nothing but contempt for the democratic process within her own party. But having said that, Donald Trump, yes, he's an outsider. I like outsiders. I consider myself to be an outsider in politics. But let me remind you that Benito Mussolini was an outsider, and that was not a very good choice for the Italians. Okay. Allow me to make the point, David, and Carol, that the juxtaposition with Mussolini was not arbitrary. Mussolini also used exactly the same strategy of gathering up support through cultivating fear and loathing and division. He was also the one that was appealing to blue-collar workers, to the abandoned working class. Remember, Mussolini was the one who introduced Social Security in Italy. That is fascism for you. Dividing people, turning one part of the population against the other, pacifying the working class by means of some transfers and cultivating the ugliest and more vulgar aspects of humanity.
Okay. Lisa Duffy.
I have family in America, and they are so concerned with what's happening out there. As the lady said here, is this the best America has got to offer? That is shocking, to be honest with you. They're both deeply unpopular characters. Theresa May is going to need to build a relationship with whoever wins in 20 days' time, and to make sure we have a stable Western society. But actually, Hillary's experience being Secretary of State, that puts her ahead of Trump. She's ahead in the polls. What Trump has done, and I think we can compare a lot of that to what happened over here with Brexit, it's disaffected voters. It's voters that feel that the establishment no longer represent them. And I think that's why Trump is building this momentum.
But your leader of UKIP is a Trump supporter, isn't he? I mean, he was last night at the debate.
That's right, yes. And Nigel is his own man, and Nigel is allowed to
I thought he was UKIP's man.
Now Nigel is over in America with him making his own decision. As for UKIP, from my personal perspective, should not get involved in American politics. We didn't like it when Obama came over here and said, vote to stay. So why should we go over there? But that is Nigel's choice, and he's not there representing UKIP. He's there supporting Trump as Nigel Farage. But the comparisons, if I can just finish off slightly, the comparison is there are many disaffected people out there, and this is why Trump is building the momentum up. I don't feel I could, if I was over there, could vote for Trump. But equally, as the gentleman said there, you know, I'd probably be going for a third option. So it's deeply concerning.
OK, take a couple more points, then we go on to another question. Yes, come back to you, Cameron. Just you said.
And Conrad Black said that Donald Trump was not complicit in some of the American decisions that have happened over the last few years. But what he is absolutely complicit in is the systematic degradation of women, whether it's verbal, whether it's physical. How anybody could put their cross in the box next to a man who has said and done the things he has done to women. You know, I'm a father of a daughter. I couldn't look my daughter in the eye if I voted for that man.
Absolutely. Conrad.
The fact is he has a perfect record as an equal opportunity employer. He is definitely an absolutely fanatical proponent and practitioner of equal pay for work of equal value. He promotes women. He is not a misogynist. He is certainly not a racist. I agree that some of the things that he said have been outrageous, but you'll note, if you look at it, that the Republican primaries this year pulled 60% more votes than the Republican primaries 4 years ago. And it's because Donald has gone after what's called in that country the Archie Bunker vote, which I think the approximation here would be the Alf Garnett vote. People who don't vote, they think the whole thing's a stitch-up. It's just a bunch of swells and snobs pretending to go through democracy, and they have nothing to do with it. And Donald is getting these people energized and up and out, and he's only said what he felt he needed to do to get those people going. He has made it absolutely clear he is for legitimate immigration. He is absolutely in favor of women's rights. And as for the British angle, and I must say this for Hillary too, both of them would be a massive improvement in terms of respect for Britain and caring to build back the great British-American alliance of Roosevelt and Churchill and Reagan and Thatcher. Both candidates would do it. Both of them.
But what Donald Trump says does matter. And the fact that he said so many degrading things about women is an absolute disgrace. He has. He basically endorsed sexual assault on women. It was
He's apologized for it.
Oh,
he apologized. We should accept his apology.
Well, Conrad, he did not apologize for calling the Mexicans who live in their millions in the United States rapists that must be kept out of the country by means of a huge wall that Mexico should pay for.
Right.
This is the kind of investment into hatred,
12 million
which is
illegal migrants? What were they doing? What's the political class of America been doing? 12 million unskilled workers come in illegally, and they just sit there like suet puddings? That isn't leadership.
But he called them rapists.
He called a few of them rapists. He said that percentage is higher than the average population. Go ahead. Talk sense, to be honest.
Briefly, Ken Clarke, the trouble is, he's taken the debate into this argument about trivia. I couldn't care less what insult he's hurled at Mexicans. I don't hurl insults at Mexicans myself. Obviously, his behaviour towards women is outrageous.
So what, racism
it completely distracts from the point we want a better government of the most powerful nation in the world. And he gets votes, as Conrad just said, it's protest. Anti-establishment protest, anti-Washington protest, people disappointed. Change isn't helping them. It's those who miss out, as Theresa May says. And it produces Marine Le Pen in France. It produces this five-star movement led by a professional comedian in Italy, who is winning elections now. I could go throughout the entire of Europe. There are groups.
We'll save you that, because we better
Mr.
move
Farage also represented protest, as did the Leave vote. That's why he's out there supporting.
Thank you.
Kenneth, Donald is more serious than Beppe Grillo, and his party slogan is not the F word.
But he's probably more dangerous than Beppe Grillo.
Okay, we've had a quarter of the programme on this. 20 days from now we'll know what the answer is. I think we'll move on to another question.
I think Donald Trump deserves it.
Gary Young, please.
Is it time for MPs, the media and the Remourners to stop complaining and positively embrace the will of the British majority?
All right, Ken Clarke, you were the person who said a referendum isn't binding. It's just an opinion poll.
Well, I happen to have firstly, for 50 years, I believed it's in the national interest for Britain to be in the European Union, and I'm very glad we've benefited from it as much as we have. The last 40 years, the country's been transformed, not just because of it, but it's gave us the chance of reforming when I was a young man, and made us a modern country with a more modern economy. We had to create that. We're in the right setting in this big single market. I've never been in favour of referendums. I was quite open about that. My constituents voted to remain. I've been on the losing side of general elections. When I turn up in Parliament, I'm not told I must agree with the government. They've just won. It's quite wrong for me to start voting against education policy or something. And I'm there to use my best judgment, which happens, fortunately for me, to coincide with my constituents. The other thing is, all right, we voted Brexit. I'm sure we are going to leave the European Union. The campaign, the arguments, did not touch on what we actually voted for. What system are we now putting in place? Am I going to be told that we're now going to renegotiate the single market, the customs union, that presumably elaborate negotiations will go on about the trade and automobiles and components, which are very international, and I'm going to be told I don't agree with that? He said, oh, no, the British people have spoken. They have decided that this arrangement is the one that Parliament's got to vote for.
Well, they did. That is what they decided, isn't it?
No, it was never even discussed. The people who voted Leave voted for a variety of reasons, and what it added up to, they wanted to leave the European Union. I accept that. But there were, as on the Remain side, a whole lot of different reasons why they voted. Absolutely nobody even talked about what you did instead of staying in the European Union. Brexiteers in Parliament don't agree with each other.
No, but do you embrace the will of the British majority, which is what Gary's question was, that the majority want to leave the EU, and do you support that?
Not for the first time. I am totally against referendums, but I don't want to make that the main point, because that dodges my arguments about Europe. I have often looked at an opinion poll and said, I don't agree with the majority. I think they're mistaken. I don't think that's genuinely in our interest. My job as a politician is to try to argue, to change opinion, to vote for what I believe to be right, and then, if I get the chance, demonstrate and work in practice.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, well, she must answer for herself.
I think during the lead up to the referendum, I think many more people had done a lot more research than what sort of the media or politicians gave us credit for.
Absolutely.
We spent a lot more time and a lot more effort wading through the rubbish that we heard, and the silly infighting and all of the rubbish statistics that was coming out. We'd done a lot more research. I know a lot of people, and obviously there's a lot of people here who did that too.
Yeah.
Politicians work for us. They work for us. They don't work for anybody else. They work for us.
All right.
So,
and you think Ken Clarke should accept what's happened, in other words?
I just think that all I've heard since the referendum has been the result, which was a shock result, wasn't for me, but it was a shock result, is negativity. I just want to hear some positivity. I want to hear some, because positivity breeds positivity. So at the end of the day, you know, my kids come to me and ask me what Brexit's all about. All they see on the news and or stuff on the telly is negative. They're even getting taught negative stuff at school about it, which I'm not happy about.
Lisa, hold on, Ken. Lisa Duffy.
Yeah, I mean, Gary, you make a fantastic point. You know, when are they going to stop moaning? Ken doesn't like referendums. Is that because the people are making the decision through a referendum? More people than ever before voted in that referendum, and 17.4 million people wanted to leave. And that is a phenomenal result. Our politicians should not ignore that. And I find it quite bizarre that the MPs that are now claiming that they're claiming that the sovereignty, that our sovereignty from our parliament, they're demanding their sovereignty rights when they've been giving away our sovereignty for the last 40 years. And I just think that's ridiculous. Personally, I don't think we're moving fast enough. Had I become leader of UKIP, I would have been pushing our party to keep pushing for repealing of the 1972 European Communities Act and actually get the decision-making back in the hands of our parliament, not trying to get 27 member states all to agree around a table. And if we go in and talk about trade and single market, America, £2 trillion in terms of investment, and they don't have to be part of the single market. They don't have to have free movement of people. £500 billion in China and 164 million in Japan. We've got countries queuing up wanting to trade with us.
Right.
Let's get on with the job, please.
Okay. Good morning, now. You in the second row. Yes.
I think saying that people should stop complaining about the result when they voted to remain, it's kind of saying that you shouldn't stand up for what you think, and especially for me, because I thought that we should remain, but I didn't get the ability to vote because I'm 16. And I think that saying that people should stop mourning for what they believe, because it's against what they believe in, if they believe that we should remain, then I think they should have the right to say that they thought we should remain, and I don't think people should say, oh, stop complaining. You know, if you voted for something and it's not came through, then you should have the right to say that you disagree with what's happened.
So, Gary, what do you say to her?
I'm not saying not to have an opinion. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, and to form their own opinion based on what they believe. What I'm saying is, if in the media, especially, as well as politicians that I've seen on the media, that just all it's about is doom and gloom. The vote's been the referendum. Ken Clarke says he doesn't like referendums, but that's in the past. We've voted. Let's embrace it and let's take it forward.
Yanis Varoufakis.
Before the referendum, even though I'm one of those foreigners that you want to keep out.
No. Let's get it right.
I'm joking.
We like you.
Thank you. I feel really loved here. I crisscrossed the country. I was in Scotland, I was in Wales, I was in Doncaster, in Leeds, and I was campaigning for what I would refer to a radical remain in the EU against this EU. Of course, you folks didn't buy this kind of argument. You voted for Brexit. As a Democrat, I have to agree with you guys. I despise, firstly, the demonization of the people who voted against us, people like me, and I despise the way in which the establishment would like to do to the British people what the European Union did to the Irish in 2008. You remember the Irish had a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty in 2008, and they voted against it, and then they were asked to vote again, and they were told that they would have to keep voting until they deliver the right verdict, right?
Shocking.
Having said that, the greatest argument for Brexit, even though it didn't convince me because I remain a Remainer, the greatest argument for Brexit concerns the restoration of national sovereignty and the sovereignty of the House of Commons. But what does this mean at this juncture where we are? What it means is that we need to create the circumstances for the House of Commons to enter into a debate on what kind of Brexit you have. Because my interpretation of the 23rd of June result is, you lot the British people I mean, since I'm not one of you, what you said to the establishment was, start cooking, recipe will follow. In other words, we want Brexit. We don't know what Brexit we want because we haven't had an opportunity to discuss this.
But yeah, and we were quite clear. You know, it was about.
Maybe you were, but
hang on,
there was never a debate.
But Yanis, you know Europe well enough. You were a finance minister in Greece. You know the workings of Europe. It would have been impossible to actually say we want Brexit, and by the way, this is the detail.
Of course.
Because until you start
it's not a criticism. What
no.
I'm saying is a fact that Britain has decided for Brexit, but you have not decided which Brexit. And there is a multitude of potential Brexits, and which Brexit you choose is going to determine the future of this nation. And I do not want to see that future being decided behind closed doors by this Python-esque Department of Exit, whatever it is that you call it, staffed by several people of very low IQ in my estimation.
Oh, really? Who are these?
Who are
Name
absolutely
names.
outside the mainstream, both of Britain and outside the process of Parliament.
I think you have to name names if you're going to say that.
I'm not going to name any names. You know the names very well.
All right. The woman here.
I mean, the biggest shock for me was, yeah, the country voted out. So for me, why isn't our Parliament, why are our politicians backing the people? The people have said, because after all, we're the ones that vote for you in, so why aren't you backing the people?
Together now, in no man's land, together, all together now, all together now, all together now.
Why isn't that happening? Another big shocker when Tony Blair just...
So you think Ken Clarke, who says he disagreed, and 48% of the country agree with Ken Clarke, he should just ignore all that and go with you?
Yeah, the people want. The people have said they want out, so why aren't
what
you
does
backing
out
us?
mean? Do you know what customs are?
No. Leave the EU. We want to take control of our own British industry.
Do you want companies that produce stuff in your area? Every time they export something to the continent, do you want them to have to submit themselves to customs report, to have to prove...
All right, you're going into detail which you've already said. But hang on, Yanis, you're going into detail which you already said it would have been impossible to discover before the vote.
No, but this is a detail that we must discuss now.
All right, Conrad Black.
I was a Brexiter because Prime Minister Cameron promised full-on treaty change, I quote him. And he came back with, as I understand it, an EU acceptance of the principle that it would consider British applications for varied treatment of migrants. And that's not full-on British treaty change. And I am a traditionalist, and I believe in this the sceptred isle, Shakespeare's sceptred isle. This is a great nation. It's one of the world's greatest nations. I understand. I mean, Ken Clarke and I have had this argument for 30 years, always very cordially, and usually over a good deal of Scottish whiskey. But the fact is, you British must understand that you are one of the greatest nations in the world. And you've been... I think that the European countries have set aside these horrible quarrels that made the whole continent a bloodbath for thousands of years. We all rejoice in that. But that doesn't mean that Britain has to be treated like a town council in Portugal or something, where you have to array bananas in certain ways and have one-size-fits-all condoms and everything. For God's sakes, it's a great nation.
OK. You, sir, and then I come to you. You, sir, on the gangway there, yes?
The comment I find utterly insulting is from Gary on the front row, suggesting that his children's heads have been filled with anti-Brexit ideas from people in schools. Working in the school myself, the one thing we've tried to do over the last few months, we've had 2 topics so far tonight, Trump or Clinton and Brexit. The one thing we are trying to achieve is debate, reasoned debate on both sides. We want our students to watch this programme, we want them to engage. The last thing we need is throwaway comments like that, suggesting that schools are filling kids' heads with personal opinions. That is not what is happening.
OK.
Can I just...
No. Angela's turn. No, come back. You can come back. Angela Rayner has not had a chance yet. Angela Rayner has not had a chance.
Well, Gary, I was a home carer and I was a shop steward. I earned my stripes on the shop floor, and I've been an elected public servant all my life, so I always respect the people's vote. And my constituency voted much the same as this constituency, and they wanted out of Europe. I understand that loud and clear. One of the things that we're trying to do, though, in being optimistic about Britain's future, is clarity on what that future is, because we know half of our exports go to Europe. We need those exports. We need that access to the single market. And we also know that the government has no plan around controls on immigration, for example, and we know that that was a big concern for people. There is no blueprint, no plan. They've cast us aside, and our economy is already on the brink because of this. Universities, we're already losing research places because of what the government has done.
So just to get this clear, you accept that a majority voted to leave the EU, but you think that they actually want to stay in the single market?
I think that the people
and
want
it's possible to stay in the single market.
People want decent jobs. They want to know what leaving
you
Europe.
mentioned the single market.
I mentioned the single market.
Are you saying
because
people who
really
voted to get out wanted to stay in the single market?
I think people need to have the clarity around what it means for our economy. Our economy is already suffering as a result. Our pound has weakened as a result of that. And Theresa May is differing. Theresa May is differing all the time on the decisions, and there's no clarity at all about what it means. That's already harming. You know what? What will happen is our public services and our jobs will be the ones that go first, and that's what I worry about.
The woman in the third row there, and then I'll come to you. Yes.
I read just recently that Deutsche Bank is in a great state of crisis. It holds a large debt, the debts of many nations in the European Union. It is linked directly to the European Central Bank. It is linked to Barclays. It is linked to Citibank. It is like a house of cards waiting to fall. The audit for the European Union has not been written off in 20-odd years, and we want to stay in a union which is crumbling already. I just find it absolutely...
And you, sir, over there, the man on the far right there.
I'd like to actually ask the members of Parliament that are present on the panel what part of democracy they don't actually understand. Parliament had a ballot, did it not, in order to have the referendum. They voted 6-1 to have the ballot. You took that ballot, you took the chance, we had the referendum, you didn't get the answer that you wanted, and now you want to turn it round. I didn't vote for the last government. Can I have a ballot?
Can I answer your question? I mean, what I was saying, and my clarity is that I'm not saying, and I'm not suggesting we ignore the vote. The vote is quite clear. But as a Member of Parliament, I have a responsibility for British jobs, British workers, and for our public service, and to support that. So you need clarity that we're going to safeguard that.
No. All right.
Sorry, your job is to represent the public, the people who elect you. Start doing your job. If you don't like it, clear off. Simple as
that. You can satisfy 58% of my constituents voted to remain. You want me to tell them to clear off? I don't wish to do that. I try to represent, the best of my ability, all my constituents. I always have. And what I do is try to use my judgment of what is in the national interest, the interests of my constituents, and then I go back and I'm accountable for it, and if they don't like me, you can throw me out. That's called parliamentary democracy, and that's how we've been governed for years. We've introduced referendums. Harold Wilson started it in modern times, but I've lost that argument, and Brexit, I've lost that in the referendum. Now, the referendum was one question with 100 difficult questions wrapped up in it. The one thing all the Brexiteers are agreed on, is obviously the case, is we leave the European Parliament, we leave the European Council, the political institutions. No one's going to argue that. Different people who voted Brexit, even different MPs, current ministers, don't agree. Did it mean we cease our open, free trading arrangements with Europe? Or did it mean we stay in and break the political links? You cannot leave free access to a market of 500 million people without making yourself poorer than you otherwise would be. The Americans don't have, the Japanese don't have that access. That's why in the middle of long, difficult negotiations, which are about to break down, trying to get a better trade agreement, the so-called, TTIP, the sort of US-EU agreement. We pull out. All kinds of difficulties, as Yanis was saying, have now got to be negotiated.
So given what you're saying, was the Prime Minister wrong to say that a vote to leave would mean leaving the single market, which is what he said during the campaign? Or did you disagree with him saying that? David Cameron said it.
Well, he said that, and some of the Brexiteers did, others didn't. The main argument in the campaign was it was scaremongering to say that we'd anyway be affected in our trading. The main argument that people like Boris were using was, no, they have to sell their cars to us. Nothing will change. All that trade and business stuff, no, it'll be exactly as it was. Now we're saying we're pulling out, and it's extremely complicated to work out what you do. Hartlepool needs new investment. Modern jobs. This country is one of the most business-friendly places to invest in. Plenty of places like Hartlepool have not shared in that. That's why we had a massive protest vote in the referendum. But actually making it less attractive for investment is not going to do much good for your children, my children, the next generation who want to do well in the long run.
Thank you very much. I'll come to you. Yes.
Mr Clarke, why can't we deal through the World Trade Organization with the European Union, as all the rest of the world do?
But it's wholly inferior.
No, it's not.
I'm quite rightly being stopped.
Excuse me, that's not.
Hold on a second. Let me get
Nissan
I've had my time.
went to Theresa May and got a promise that she cannot deliver. There is no way that this government can promise Nissan protection and compensation for
This is for investment in their plant in Sunderland.
without providing the same protection for other companies like Nissan. And the British government simply does not have the capacity to do this. So you already see that Theresa May has gotten herself into a major degree of trouble, simply because you haven't had the chance yet to sit down and have a proper debate in Parliament. And I don't believe this Parliament has a mandate to have this debate. The next one will. So if
do you think it was a mistake to make the promise?
What we mean by democracy? We mean a parliamentary process where you run in an election, you contest an election on the basis of your proposal about what kind of Brexit you have, and then you have a full parliamentary term to discuss this, and then in the end reach a mature decision about what it is.
Sorry, what did you say? Wait a minute, what did you say?
We didn't vote for, we voted for Brexit. And
Yes.
the reason Brexit is going to take so long, and it is going to be hard, is because the likes of Ken Clarke have
But
never done a
which
hard
Brexit
day's
did you
work in
vote
his
for?
life, and he's to roll his socks
All
up
right.
and get on with it. Who's a fool?
Wait a
Talk in the
No,
country,
Ken, just hang on.
In it for himself.
Conrad Black, you said you voted Brexit. What do you think the outcome will be? Do you think, like he says, it'll be obfuscated by people like Ken Clarke who want to fight every inch of the way against it?
No, but I suspect I'm in a minority of one in this room in saying this. I think the Europeans will come to their senses and actually, especially under the influence of the German and British governments, and will actually make a serious request of the UK to reconsider and make further concessions, that there is a chance that this new Prime Minister would change the game and therefore have to be presented, not necessarily in a referendum, but at least considered by the country. I think the Europeans will actually come to that view because of two reasons. The objections that have been expressed tonight and were expressed on referendum night, June 23, are widely felt in many other European countries. So in that sense, you're a bellwether. It's not Britain against 26 others. Don't imagine it is. And secondly, it would be a terrible loss. It is a big bloc, but this is, next to Germany, the economically biggest country, and as a moral authority in the world. It is the most powerful, morally, of all of the European countries, and it would be a terrible loss to Europe to lose Britain. So despite the perversity and the nauseatingly anti-democratic tendencies of many of the people in charge in Brussels, they are not all completely insane, and even if they have to be muscled heavily by the elected governments...
Conrad, this would only happen in a parallel universe where Brussels is rational.
I'll just finish my sentence.
Not the universe we live in.
There's a chance of reconsideration.
All right.
And we're not leaving Europe, we're leaving the European Union, if I may say.
But despite the noises coming out of European leaders, not just Brussels, that we're going to have a tough time, you think that they will actually change their view? Like Monsieur
I think they'll have a stab at it.
Okay, you said.
Do you really think Europe's going to just let us come back in with no penalties whatsoever? They've already turned around and said that if the Parliament overturned the ruling, they will just impose penalties. So there's going to be implications if we want to go back in anyhow. So why not just do the Article 50 and get out?
Yeah.
Because that's what we voted for. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let me make I'm going to...
There's no way that Europe's going to come and come back with open arms.
I wasn't saying how you should respond to it, but I was asked what I thought would happen.
They're not going to come back and say, we'll get you open arms. Nothing's going to change. I don't think so. So let's do the Article 50 now and get out.
Okay, Article 50. We'll do 59 as well. Not in Article 59. I don't know what it says. Right, I think we've got a lot of hands up, and week by week this is going on, but I think we should take another question. Just before I do, we're going to be in Gloucester next week and in Watford the week after. So do come to question time, either in Gloucester next week, Watford the week after. There on the screen is the email address and the telephone number. I'll give them at the end. Let me take this question from Carol Cook, please. Carol Cook.
Should all child migrants be given age tests before being allowed into the country?
A question, of course, about the dispute about people coming in from Calais and whether they're really children, and where are the children, and why are there people who seem to be a great deal older coming in. Yanis Varoufakis, what do you think?
I don't think you should be looking at the gift horse in the mouth. And I know this is a jarring dissonance in this part of the world, but I have met refugees, I've met migrants. We have the largest number of them in Greece. Indeed, something that most people don't know is that in 1991, when the Iron Curtain came down, 1 million refugees came to Greece and stayed, and they never left. The result is that we're a stronger and better country. On this issue, allow me just make a couple of 2 points. Firstly, those kids, whether they are kids or young adults, even if they are 25, even if they are 30, even if they are 40,
Sorry,
believe
who was
you me,
what are you complaining about?
that they are 70 years old, whatever, that they are OAPs,
all right,
seeking somewhere to retire. The simple proposition I'm going to put to you is this. Treat these people with respect as they are coming into your country. Treat their trauma, treat them as human beings, and they will love you forever, and they will become the staunchest supporters of the United Kingdom.
Lisa Duffy.
What I'll start off saying is it's absolutely the right thing to do to help the children that need help, that are sat in those camps in Calais.
Whereas treating their parents as if they are
No,
rascals
these
to
are
be
children.
despised,
These
right?
are children that are on their own. No, I'm not saying that at all.
That is such hypocrisy.
It's not hypocrisy.
You care about the children
Yes, so
and
where
you
are the
demonize
children?
their parents
We
and
have seen-
their older
Let me
brothers
speak,
and
Gary.
uncles.
We have seen young adults coming into our country and we are being told they are children. I've got 6 children. I've got a 26-year-old and I've got a 13-year-old. I know when I wake up in the morning which one's going to work and which one's going to school. You can tell who is an adult and who is a child. Where are the young children? Where are the girls? Where are the teenagers? We need to bring them in and get them with their families if they have families here. And also what I would say is, you know, there are foster families that will take these children in and love and care for them. And like you say, they will build a rapport, they'll stay with our country. The young adults that have come in, the men that we've seen, they'll stay in this country because they'll now start claiming asylum. But actually, for every adult that comes into this country, there is a vulnerable child still in that Calais camp. And that really concerns me greatly.
Okay. Ken Clarke.
Well, in every advanced country, in every successful city in the world, all the ones that are leading the current world economy, in my lifetime I've seen the emergence of a multinational, multi-ethnic, multicultural society. I saw my first black face when I was about 10 years old and was rather puzzled to see somebody with a different complexion. I now, unlike some people, I don't get upset if I hear people speaking a foreign language I don't understand on the bus. And indeed, in my working life, for half the time, I'm meeting people who were born in another country or their parents were. And I think society in this country today is much better than it was. I also think we have benefited from the change so long as we control it properly, let in honest people who contribute to our economy and live here properly, but we have to control the numbers. Okay. Now, I don't want to lose our reputation for being the most tolerant country in the world. We're getting a reputation for disliking foreigners now outside our boundaries. The idea that we're going to scrutinise the teeth of a few hundred young boys in Calais in the hope that we can find one who's just over 18 so we can keep a few more of them out strikes me as a fairly ridiculous and actually quite unpleasant suggestion. No doubt Mr. Trump will try it out on the Mexican border.
You said the very back.
I think
yes.
there's a much bigger picture here. I think the problem is the EU don't allow us to know who's got criminal records that are coming in from the EU, and what we're finding is our prisons are filling up with foreigners. We need to protect our own people. Yes, we can take genuine child refugees, but we need to protect UK citizens at the same time.
Absolutely. Okay, and the person on your right.
This is nothing to do with the EU. This is about people coming from Syria. And the idea what Lisa suggests, that you can separate kids from the adults. If you're sending people, if people are coming over here all the way from Syria, you don't just want kids, you want people to come as families. You shouldn't be separating
But
people.
what I will say, in answer to your question,
your turn.
can I answer this question?
Well, I think we have to put it into context. You know, Save the Children estimate around 200 children that have got family connections here that would be coming from the Calais camps, and at the moment 14 have come to the UK. The government have acted incredibly slow on this matter, and those children are at risk of exploitation, sexual exploitation, abuse, and they're living in squalor. And we have always had a proud tradition to call ourselves a decent society. We always look after them, and we already have, coming back to Carol's question, we already have age tests. The issue of x-raying children's teeth, it wouldn't work. The experts say it wouldn't work. That's not a way of doing it. And do you know what? Are we going to treat kids like livestock? I've got a 19-year-old son. He's still my baby. He's 19, but he's still my baby. And I don't think we should treat human beings that way.
Right. Jack Straw, who was in the last Labour government as Home Secretary, said he'd certainly have not rule out dental checks, but that perhaps
well,
a new Labour
Dental associations say they don't work.
Conrad Black.
I think everybody in the room agrees that all countries need immigration and benefit from immigration. I think everybody in the room would agree that these are terribly tragic humanitarian problems that have arisen, and we all want to be as generous as we practically can. And Yanis makes a very good point that Greece has, for a relatively small population, borne a tremendous brunt of these immense waves of people fleeing violence and poverty. But Kenneth is surely right. We want the immigration, and we want to be generous, but we have to control the numbers. And when I say we, I mean all countries. And your ending comment was a gratuitous shot at Donald Trump, who's entirely in favor of immigration, but says we have to have a border so that we can identify the people who cross it. But we'll let people in, but they have to apply, and we'll let them in legally. Well, I think that's reasonable too.
Okay. I'll just hear one more point. Now, I've heard from you, so the woman behind you. Yes.
It's fair enough to say that we want to limit immigration. And while actually I'm one of the immigrants that is no longer welcome here, I'm Polish, I've been here for 23 years, never been discriminated until Brexit came about. And my question is to Conrad.
Sorry, just before you go on,
yes.
In what way do you feel discriminated against since Brexit?
I feel I'm no longer wanted by 52% of the voters because majority of the people who voted... Can I just finish, please? Can I just finish? You can come in a minute and boo me in a minute. Because 52% of the voters voted against immigration. Polish is the second most popular language in this country.
We don't want to stop immigration.
And therefore,
we want to control
majority of the people, not all of the people, majority of the people voted against the Poles, who work extremely hard. I interpret for some people who work for 12 hours, 7 days a week. They work in such conditions that most of the people would not want to work, and yet they are the ones that British population wants to get out. I mean, I'm married a British person, I've got British children. I love the British society, but at the moment, I don't feel welcomed.
Okay, thank you. Right. All right, we'll come back to you, Lisa, because we've got a question from Timothy Fleming, and I think it's the last one we have time
our newest councillor. Congratulations.
It's a namesake, it's not me.
49.7% of the vote share, so well done you.
Timothy Fleming, dentist.
Thank you. What is left for UKIP after Brexit? Are recent events the death throes of a party without a purpose?
Now that, in other words, you won what you wanted at the referendum, Lisa Duffy, are you in your death throes?
Absolutely not. I think UKIP now are more relevant than we've ever been. What we've got at the moment is we have won the referendum. We haven't actually got Brexit, as we've heard here this evening. So we've got a huge amount of work to do as a political party to keep that pressure on. But also, we're going into a second phase of our political party, and that is getting more councillors elected. We're at the official opposition here, which is absolutely amazing, and well done to those councillors. But also, we have a fully costed manifesto that couldn't be argued with in 2015. It's about building on that and now going and selling that to the electorate and getting ourselves fit for purpose for 2020.
Why have you fallen so badly in the polls since the referendum?
Well, it depends what poll you look at, doesn't it? You know, 49.
Right, so what's your best?
Let me just at 49.7% here in Hartlepool.
At the general election.
So in the general election, we got
you were second here, but
we were second here, and we only need a 4% swing, actually, David, to take this seat. So Labour, watch out. But actually, we are relevant. And you know, we are going through some change at the top of the party at the moment, which everyone, you know, highly embarrassing in some points and really strong in others. By November the 28th, we'll have a very strong NEC, we'll have a new party leader, and we'll really be pushing on and selling ourselves to the electorate for 2020.
Are you running for that job this time again?
I've made some serious considerations, but I think other people are going to come on board, such as Paul Nuttall and Suzanne Evans, so I think I shall leave it to them to run this time, and I'll focus on my community and celebrating 50 years of Christmas lights and getting those lights up this year.
Ken Clarke, do you think we're watching the death throes of UKIP?
It's obviously going to have to change.
They seem to be coming over to you, don't they? Like Stephen Wolfe wanted to join the Tories.
I think some will come back to us. But
would you welcome that?
Depends what their views are. The referendum result was a triumph for Nigel Farage. It was, I can't remember a politician who's taken up a single-issue cause and won it. He was personally almost responsible with the help of his party, and he was the first man who had the bright idea of getting more votes for leaving the European Union by blaming the European Union for immigration and rousing fears about foreigners and all the rest of it. And people like Boris and Michael just really gave him respectability at the end.
I think Nigel's been respectful for the last 23 years.
Now, they obviously can't carry on because they've won the referendum and they've now got to find a cause, and UKIP are not very good at giving any detail when you get to these difficult issues. We started with trade this evening, we won't go back there, but environment, security and so on, about what we know now.
We'll have a read of our 2015 manifesto.
But they are, it sounds as though in Hartlepool, they have also found what's happened in every other Western democracy. They're still the vehicle for just angry protest. A feeling in towns are left out, people are left out, and against it.
Right to their communities.
I personally would like to find some way of responding to that angry protest, but getting it channelled into political outlets which are more attractive than UKIP is, I think. I very much hope it never becomes a formidable force in British politics.
I think we already are. Look what we've achieved so far without a huge amount of MPs. Just think what we will be like when we do have a huge amount of MPs in 2020.
The woman there.
Being very honest, I've found UKIP a poisonous force in Hartlepool in recent years. And
poisonous force?
Yeah, I'm a secondary school teacher, and some of the incidents, it links back to what the lady said up there in the last point, that to me, UKIP have almost given the licence to people for views that would have been regarded as disgraceful in the past. It's suddenly okay to voice some of these opinions about get out of our country.
No, I don't believe that.
I'm seeing a lot of that. I am seeing that. It's unfair to say that I'm brainwashing my kids because this isn't something that I would go and share my personal opinions. Like the gentleman earlier said, we encourage debate and we encourage healthy debate without stressing our opinions on them. But this UKIP influence has just inflamed it. The way we spoke about Trump earlier, Trump has given licence to people to do the ludicrous things.
All right. We have to... We've got to keep moving because we're almost at the end. Angela Rayner, and then I'll come to you, Yanis and you, Conrad.
Well, I think UKIP are a busted flush, but what upsets me is when you've got two women in the audience that have said that they feel intimidated and that they feel that it's been toxic, that they've been booed and hissed because of it. I think it's damaging to our country, the way they try and divide us all the time. They've got no answers to the real questions and the quizzes that we need. You wanted to privatise the National Health Service. And
one person said that. Read our manifesto, Angela. We do not want to privatise the NHS.
Well, you can try and shout me down, but it's my turn to speak.
Well, it is, but get your facts right when you're saying them. We do not want to privatise the NHS. We're very clear about that.
Also, your time is very nearly up, so
thank you.
So I think there is some real concerns that we need to take heed of people's anger, and we need to start investing in our communities because people feel fed up that politicians have all been the same, and I intend to do that. We don't need UKIP.
The country needs UKIP.
Looking at the situation from the outside, as I do, I'm amazed by the Ovidian metamorphosis of Theresa May and all the other Remainers who suddenly became hard Brexiters. This, to us, Europeans on the other side of the pond, is an astonishing phenomenon. And those of you who were members of UKIP or who were Brexiteers must wonder about these people. How could they undergo such a transformation? Do you trust them? I wouldn't if I were you. But look, to answer your question, Timothy, I think that, Lisa, you have a very difficult task ahead because Theresa May, with this metamorphosis of hers, has now turned the Tory party into UKIP. And UKIP doesn't have to win any elections, not a single constituency anymore, because this Brexiteer mindset has now infiltrated the Tory party at the detriment of people like Ken Clarke.
All right. Conrad Black, we only have 30 seconds or so, if you can...
You're almost alone,
just...
I think the Conservative Party should make an unrefusable offer to UKIP to join, as the Unionist Party did in a different context a long time ago, and it was for a long time the Conservative and Unionist Party. Can I just say a final word on this matter of democracy that has been bandied about from different angles? Britain and the United States are democracies, and in a democracy, ultimately, the people are always right. The question was, are these the best candidates the Americans can get? There were 14 candidates for the Republican nomination, and just remember this, Donald, whatever anyone here thinks of him, he kept the Ted Cruz loonies out. He kept the people with the machine guns in the back window of their pickup trucks who spent all their time at the shooting ranges out of control of the party of Mr. Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt and Dwight Eisenhower and Ronald Reagan. He did do that.
Okay. Well, the hand's up, but our time's up, I'm afraid.
I've been getting